Thanks for inviting us to this. It's nice to see, having been working the human dimension, as we'll call it, for the last 10 years now. It's an honor to be invited here, and I appreciate the invite. I have a few slides here. You know, you got to have slides if you're at least U.S. Army. But the point is, I want to go through quickly so we can get into some question and answers. But I'll give you some background. Literally 10 years ago, General Wallace, I got pulled in from an ADC, a first ID, and I got pulled in this organization called TRADOC, Training and Doctrine Command. And we were standing up a new organization called ARCIC, Army Capabilities, Rapid Capabilities Integration Center. Basically, it's all bureaucracy, and I had no clue what I was doing, but as a general, you get those jobs. So they have a thing called JSIDs in process, and when I get in, I go, holy cow, no wonder we don't get anything out in the field, because you had to negotiate Washington and all of those factors. But the key was we were standing this up, but General Wallace, who was the TRADOC commander at that time, says, look, in the U.S. Army, we stand up a thing called concept documents, and then concept documents are translated to capability documents, and then capability documents, by the way, I dealt with the capabilities, then it goes to the G3 and the G8, where they prioritize and then tell you you can only have about half the capabilities you really want, and then Congress funds the other quarter, you know, only a quarter of that, and then eventually it goes to the Acquisition Corps and you actually get it. Of course, that process can take 5 to 10 years, but to start it off, we said, you know, everybody gets enamored with the new tanks and the new technologies and the new satellites, and we had no concept for the human. And General Wallace says we need a concept for the human because future conflicts, and by the way, we'd been already participating in multiple at that time frame, as everybody in this audience probably has over the last 20 years. This is more about humans. It's less about bombs and bullets. It's more about working with the cultures and societies. It's more about nation building. It's more about influence ops than it is about, again, kinetic operations. So we need a concept document for the human. And that went into, you know, how do we do accessions? How do we do the training and education? But also, how do we look at other humans and other cultures, because they think different. They act different. So we put ourselves into conflict just because we come into, you know, with an American view of what the world should look like, and other people don't necessarily have that same view. So the key is okay, let's write a concept document, and which we did. And then General Wallace turns to me, because I, again, was head of bureaucracy at this time frame, and he goes, now go develop it. And I go, okay. So I, you know, being an infantry guy, I go, I have no clue on how to go even do this. So we got together all the smart people from DARPA, from NATO that you'll be hearing from. I think the mic went out here. From NATO and medical community, the G1's office, everything to deal with the human. And the concept came up to basically 3 components. We have the physical domain, the cognitive domain, and the social moral. By the way, social moral was one term we used. It morphs into other terms, ethics, everything else. So that's what we came up with the concept, and if you haven't read it, I would recommend you take a look at it because it's matured over time. They've got a strategy General Brown's been working. So what I'd like to do is go through real quickly. I'm going to focus less on the physical domain. We started when I was there to focus on the cognitive because we saw that was the bigger gap. The social moral, which I think is actually occurs in the brain too, so it was kind of related. There is no, you know, the heart is a muscle. It's not. That's not where social moral peace comes from. So you got to understand how the system works. So we started with the cognitive because we figured we had at least an 80 to 90% solution on the physical. There's still plenty to study, and I'll cover that here real quick. But I was asked for the panel is not the solutions here, but rather what are the challenges that I see? And I picked the top 3. A lot of it drive the bureaucracy aspect, but it's also dragging the technology, the human technology, and there's plenty of projects out there that we just can't get across the transom from the research side into action. So I would talk about, or my focus is how do I operationalize the human dimension for an operator's sake. I'm not the technical expert. You're going to hear from all of the scientists and everybody else later on, so I'll let them work the solutions. But essentially in the physical domain, we had three major challenges. You got the soldier's physical load, which, by the way, you know, Jesus wrote about that with the Romans. Okay, it hasn't changed over centuries. And what we've learned is, you know, the new technologies like require batteries, so I got to call batteries, so I got to lessen the soldier's load, body armor, all of that stuff. But the bottom line is, you take something out of their rucksack, they're going to put something back in what they want. So the key is the soldier load continues to be a challenge, and as you get to solutions, you know, I kind of lean to let the robot carry it, and I don't have to. I'm an infantry guy. I'd rather not carry the thing. The other aspect is studies, and I'll quote, excuse me, it's a little dry. Dr. Carl Friedel, probably one of the leading physiologists for the U.S. Army, worked at our medical research center. And he's done multiple studies, just did, I think, one recently on women in Ranger School, but that's not releasable, so I'll cover the ones that are. These are 90 studies about Ranger School, and I'm not going to go through all the details, but if you're interested, you can access the studies. But they did a great analysis of some of the challenges, but in the physiology domain. In Ranger School and high stress and stuff, and having been to Ranger School, you know, I thought they put saltpeter in there, but what he said really was you got under stress and your testosterone levels went down. So we now know there's a biochemical aspect that goes into that. By the way, there's a lot more studies. They did women at West Point studies, physiological, that went in there, went through all the changes, but believe it or not, that women actually might be shaped differently than men, so maybe body armor and equipment might not be geared to women the right way, and we ought to redesign it that way. And it goes through a lot of other aspects there. So basically that was, I'd highlight those studies, but that's a challenge. There is physiological. We need to do those studies, especially for women, and really advance that piece. The last piece I'll say on physiological stuff, unlike all of our material solutions, we don't censor the human. They don't like to be censored, but we don't censor them, so we don't know how they operate. I would argue, and a theme throughout all of this piece is we need to be base. We did not engineer the human, okay? We engineered our tank. We engineered our aircraft. We did not engineer the human. We don't know how they operate, okay? And I sort of come down on the fence. I'm less worried about how we assess it, or assess the right people in the sense of I got to go get, you know, all superhumans to bring them in and make them better. The key is we can train and educate. I just want to maximize the performance of the kids you give me. But to do that, I got to know what I'm starting with. And physiologically, I might know how tall you are. I might know your shoe size, but I don't know every aspect about that. And how do I monitor it when you're under stress, when you're under fatigue? Because we have to make decisions for commitment on that. I'm talking physical, but this will be every one of the areas. So we've got to do a better job to give the tools to the operators to understand how is this human system operating today, and how should I apply it, and how can I improve it and maximize their potential. Next slide. I will tell you that the cognitive domain is where we focused on. And as highlighted, I have a lot of background. I commanded our Battle Command Training Program. It's now called Mission Command Training Program. But basically, that's where we train everybody from the GO level up for their size units. So we did that piece. But I spent 3 hours in the Pentagon with a DARPA neuroscientist, Dr. Amy Cruz. And she's going through the whole process, and I'm going, I just sat there like every 30 minutes going, why didn't I know this? I've been in the Army 30 years, and I don't even understand how the brain works, how people make decisions, and why don't I know that? You know, a key thing, like when she first hit me up, and I guess it takes 30 years for me to know this, but, you know, the frontal lobes for critical decision making may not be fully developed until you're 30 years old. Okay, well, that just told me every squad leader, every platoon leader, potentially every company commander, at least in the U.S. Army, they may not have grown up yet. And I don't know that. And I'm putting them into very hard situations, expecting them to make rational decisions, and they literally have not grown up unless I've trained them for that environment. I've grown that neural network to do that. And so they're operating on emotions, okay? They're not operating on what we want them to operate on, critical decision-making piece. So next question is, well, can I measure that? And by the way, there's lots more that you have to learn about the neuroscience side. I kind of lean to the neuroscience side because being an electrical engineer and computer science, I sort of think the neural network-wise. But the bottom line is we don't understand how it operates. And I have discussions with the senior officers in the Army, and they go, because I've been arguing, giving different examples of how to do this, and they say, well, Pete, don't use that brain stuff. It just confuses us infantry guys and other stuff. And I go, okay, we'll try different ways to say it. But what it comes down to in my position now is we got to get smarter on the brain as leaders, okay? And when I hear that, I go, look, every soldier in the Army isn't a physiologist, but they know where the bicep muscle is. They know how it applies to their job. They know how to improve it. And we as an institution have given them systems to improve it. So as a 4-star general, your key function is decision-making. So what's the role of the limbic system in decision-making? Okay, how do you improve it? And by the way, an institution, what have we given you to improve that capability? And the answer is most don't even know what it is, okay? So the challenge for, I would argue, the senior leaders here is we got to understand how the most critical system for decision-making at senior leaders works. Now, you don't need to be a neurologist to do this, but you ought to understand the basic operating constructs behind that weapon system as we do our own system. So that's a big challenge, is we just don't know what we don't know, and we need to do a better job of that. And I argue for the Army to get a Brain 101 class just so we can understand, you know, things like your frontal lobes aren't developed. The next thing is how do I measure it, all right? I got to understand, that especially for the physical domain, and I wrote a paper called Getting to a Good Enough Cognitive Shoe Size. If I bring you into the Army and I measure, as an infantry guy, I measure your feet size. If you're a size 9 and I put you in a size 15 boot or a size 4 boot and tell you to go on a 12-mile road march, you're probably not going to perform very well. As a matter of fact, you'll probably be injured. In the cognitive domain, I don't know what size you are. So all of our technology, and believe me, I've seen what gets developed on that, we do the norm curve and we build everybody to size 9. And then we wonder why the size 4s and the size 12s don't function well and aren't performing as well. And the bottom line is we disadvantage them because we don't understand what their sizes are. There are, and by the way, you get into the argument, well, can I really measure it? I've been looking for the last 10 years. There's ways to measure it, okay? Will it meet the doc's 99.5% approval rating that it's proved? Probably not, but I'm an infantry guy. Anything above 0 is good, okay? And right now, we got 0. You send your kids on patrol tomorrow, you don't have a clue where they are cognitively unless you just sort of sense it. There's tools and mechanisms we can give these kids. Do I put them on point today or do I not put them on point today? So that's another challenge that we need. We need to get the measurement tools out there, get them out of these studies, because there's literally thousands of studies going on that could do stuff like this. And it doesn't have to be, you know, super sensitive. It just gets something there. The last thing is, as I'll mention on this, is the lack of tools and processes to do. We have to make it part of the system. So I make the argument now, and I'm working with the real smart people out here, like Steve Kornguth and Tony and the groups, on in the Army, for our equipment like a tank, we have a -10, all right? It's an operator's manual. That tells, by the way, we engineered a tank, so we know how it's supposed to operate. So what we do is our operators go, and, you know, for most of you that may have worked in those, well, it's all your equipment has a -10 equivalent. So we go through pre-combat, during combat, after combat, quarterly, semi-annual, because we want to understand the combat effectiveness of that system, okay? The human, I got nothing. Okay, they're out there. I got nothing to do that. I have no process. My argument is, let's get a -10 for a human. Let's measure their physical. Let's measure their cognitive. Let's measure their social moral, which is key, which I'll highlight on next, and where they're at. Because before I go out of the motor pool or before I go out on patrol and lead the fob, I want to know what their operating capability is. Do I put them on point today or do I not put them on point today? Because they're not ready functioning. And I want to know when their cognitive engine oil is low, all right? Because like sleep deprivation, let's put it that way. So the key is give the tools at the lowest level. By the way, I would make the argument if we do that, we can potentially get left of PTSD, left of TBI, left of moral injury, because we make the leaders responsible for the performance of the system. We aren't waiting until they break and the engine oil runs out and the engine seizes up. We get them to the docks in the timeline we get. So that, by the way, this is 10 years of we need to do this, so we have, and everybody understands the system. By the way, the first manual won't be perfect, but it's better than what we got now. The second argument on that challenge is, well, we don't have time to do that. We got to go on patrol. Has anybody ever done a PMCS on a tank before you'd move it out of the motor pool? I mean, it takes forever. But we remember who operates the tank. It's the human, okay? We do the material stuff. We don't do it to the most critical system that we have. We don't do anything. And that's my argument. We should. The science is there. Let's just do that. The last slide is the social moral domain. I would argue we didn't address this as much as when I was in TRADOC. I'm trying to address it now in a much greater detail. Tony's going to solve all this when he gets up with his panel. I keep challenging him because we keep talking about ethics. We keep talking about morals. My first question is, what are they? And whose are you talking about? Because they're all different depending on which culture. I call them everybody tribes. Where are you and which morals and ethics are you talking about and who's right? So we keep talking about it. So we had discussion like, what are the Canadian ethics? Can anybody outline those for me? So the next question is, how do I measure them? And now how do I, as a leader, actually train what we say they have? Because, you know, like America, Canada is a whole different cultures all bring together at one piece. They all have different belief systems and everything else. So how do I measure that they actually have the morals and ethics we're talking about? Because we got to do that. So, and again, I'm getting into application side, not the strategy side. I want to see if the kid, because we send these kids into situations that they do get in moral conflict. I'll call it go native, okay? And they might get through that first part, but they come back and then they suffer later. So the question is, how do we get the tools and mechanisms to help them, first of all, train them, and then also give us the tools and stuff to get them the help they need before they, again, their engine oil seizes up and they really have problems. So those are the challenges we have. By the way, there's a lot more challenges. What I will tell you, having done the research with the scientists, the universities, there's lots of great effort out there. They just haven't got to the squad leaders, the company commanders, or platoon leaders, all right? We need to make that transition so we actually have something. So, thank you.